Open the door to purity. Open the door to purity. Let the breezes blow and trumpet purity over the sea and over the land. Let men understand the voice of cosmic Christ's command. I come to open wide the way, that men without fear may ever say, I am the purity of God. I am the purity of love. I am the purity of joy. I am the purity of faith. I am the purity of grace. I am the purity of hope. I am the purity of faith, and all that God can make of joy and grace combined. Precious one, this day is the day that God hath made, and each day fresh from his hand is an opportunity to express purity, if you will but open your heart and understand that this is the rightful manifestation of the soul of God. So many individuals possess a feeling, gracious ones, of contamination, brought about as the result of the soul's memory of moments when they have not upheld the bonds and bands of purity. We therefore, in our octave of light, long to bring release and relief to mankind whose memories are soiled by the thoughts and the deeds which they have done in a lesser state of illumination, at a time when they did not understand all of the law, or even the portion of the law which they now comprehend. I long then to relieve this day the fears of those men and women who somehow or other cannot adjust to the gentle ministrations of the karmic law. The law of karma, blessed ones, is not intended to act as a lash, to tear apart the soul of men. The law of karma is intended to instruct and to cause mankind to approach the throne of grace without fear, with the clearness of mind and being that will render them able to receive the pure vibratory action of Almighty God. Gracious ones, so often individuals persist year after year in an attitude of self-condemnation. The way to clear the karmic record is not to engage oneself in this questionable indulgence of reviewing the errors of your lifetime or of lifetimes past as snatches of revelation come through to your consciousness. Rather, it is the desire of God that you review the great hopeful possibilities of the future, using the law as reference to establish marks of cosmic desire upon the infinite pathway, where you can see and perceive how that as the law of love is outpictured from day to day in varied manifestations called forth from his heart, you, by reason of your cosmic service, will become a glowing star in the firmament of those way-showers who today are the hope of every age. Certainly, the light, the clear light of the Buddha, like a glorious orb, burns in the sky of spiritual teachers. And beside the Buddha, the manifestation of his star, the Star of David, thrills the world anew year after year. and brings to the few devotees who offer their all the renewal of hope like a pulsing unfed flame that never will be extinguished. We then, who guard the purity of the universe, are anxious to abolish in man's consciousness the sense of condemnation which constantly evokes these old memories in order to establish within mankind a feeling of hopelessness, so that the same ruts and old patterns will continue to be outpictured, and thus the wonderful graciousness of God will go unrealized, because man, seeing through their own eyes and gazing at the deity, will consider the Most High God as ready to condemn them also. I would reference at this moment the love of Jesus as the woman stood before him, condemned by all those around her for her acts that did not fulfill the Mosaic law. You will recall the master stooped and wrote in the sand, and then gazed up at her and said, after all had fled, "Where are thine accusers, woman?" And she said, "There are none, Lord." And he spake and said, "Neither do I accuse thee. Go and sin no more." There is always the question in the consciousness of those who are prone to repeat the same errors again and again, that perhaps God will weary of the number of times they repeat this error. May I point out to you that the eyes of God are too pure to behold iniquity, and the Lord does not suffer from the depredations of men against their own souls, but the suffering and pain is brought out and brought forth to the individual who commits the error, and thus it can truly, rightly be said that truth and virtue are their own reward, and certainly they are their own reward forevermore. But those who err and outpicture patterns of error will find that this condition also is possessed with a reward for disservice, which is no reward at all, but is the etchings of human pain, mental suffering, criticism by oneself of oneself, bearing no fruit, but often making the heart and mind to be darkened by the concept of impurity. I come then this day determined to eradicate those patterns from the mind and consciousness of mankind. I come determined to speak the inspiring word that will cause you to be forever free from all of those concepts that have held mankind bound. You do not know the weight of condemnation, precious ones, or how the manipulators of the world manipulate individuals because of self-condemnation and cause them to suffer again and again and to do the bidding of those who would be masters of men, simply because they cannot come to the throne of grace and understand that God's purity, while it is not for sale, is a glad free gift of his heart to all who yearn for that purity. Purity, precious ones, is a natural quality of God. It is a quality that floods the universe, and it is responsible for the beautiful pure colors of the rainbow. It is responsible for the clear color of the water when it flows uncontaminated by mortal discard and rubbish. You see, precious ones, men and women must understand that through their consciousness flows, through their own mighty I Am presence, and through their higher mental body, or Holy Christ Self, the unbroken stream of God's pure energy, referenced in the book of Revelations as the crystal flowing stream that flows before the throne of God. This is the stream of God's own purity, and it can never be contaminated in the spiritual levels of life, the contamination always occurring as it passes through the nexus of mankind's consciousness where it is misqualified substance by reason of the impurity lodging in the consciousness of those who ought to understand how that God is not impure, and therefore they ought not to be either. You must understand, precious ones, that the purity of the Christ, which is fairer than the lilies themselves, was a purity of consciousness, and you ought to aspire to that purity even as you aspire to be like him. To be like him is to be possessed of his purity, and to permit his purity to possess you. You cannot have it a one-way street. It must be a two-way street, where you participate in the purity of God, even as he invests his energy in you. When this mutuality of expression, this great cosmic togetherness of your heart with God's heart takes place, it is impossible that the barriers of impurity shall remain in your life. And therefore you may take note and understand, whenever there is the appearance of impurity in your consciousness, that this ought to tell you of the great need to press your heart directly to his own beloved heart and absorb the emanations of his purity. Just as mankind have danger signals upon this planet, alarm systems to warn them when conditions of danger might occur to the planet itself or to buildings upon the planet, there are horns, precious ones, upon your cars and vehicles to warn those who may be in the pathway to stand aside. Then understand that there are also signals which mankind ought to take note of when the forces of shadow and darkness would enclose them round about by finding some means of obtaining entree into their consciousness and thus perverting or subverting that consciousness from its balance of purity to states of criticism, condemnation, and judgment of others or of themselves. This type of manifestation is but an entering wedge which often leads to great episodes of unhappiness, completely contrary to the law of your being and the power of your own mighty I Am presence. Understand then, blessed ones, that if you release yourself to the very God of gods by a determination to express his purity and a determination to abrogate all of the effects of past wrong sowings, you will be taking the first steps that will enable me to come into your world with the mighty divine presence and give you of my momentum of cosmic Christ purity that will help you to sweep aside all those seemingly intangible manifestations in your consciousness which are ever so tangible in providing a hindrance to you, those weights which beset you on every hand and prevent the full manifestation of the resurrection and ascension flames. You must comprehend, most gracious ones, how that individuals are often mere puppets in the game of life. They do not recognize that the power of God is always pouring forth the full purity of the Godhead. But simultaneously with this release of mighty assistance from on high, the negative forces of the world which you dwell in so frequently are also releasing their substance of earthly impurity. Mankind then are caught in the jaws of this situation, and because of mortal ignorance, mankind are often captivated temporarily by the tremendous waves of unhappiness which seize them when they realize that they have erred. David of old did take note of the situation and say, I have sinned. So many individuals have spoken to God, and in their prayers they have said, Lord, I am not worthy. I call to your attention how they are using the power of the I Am to claim unworthiness, when by a simple twist of reversal they could say, correctly so, regardless of the appearances in their consciousness, Lord, I am worthy of thy purity. I would have thy purity surge through me in a great cosmic burst to remove from the screen of my mind, my thoughts and my feelings, every appearance of human vibratory action and all that is impure in substance, thought, or feeling. Replace all that right now with the fullness of the mind of Christ and the mind of God, the manifest power of the resurrection spirit and the ascension flame, that I may enter into the holy of holies of my being and find the power of transmutation taking place to free me forever from all discord that ever has manifested in my world. Precious ones, when you do this, when you enter into this spirit of purity, there is an action that takes place which tends to relieve you as though you had performed a service of violet fire that lasted 10 hours. And by this tremendous manifestation of purity invoked at your command, you can have the full benefit of the cosmic flame of Christ's purity active in your life to assist you together with the violet transmuting flame in finding your freedom in this day and age. And when all is said and done, precious ones, although you often are mindful of the group and collective consciousness of those with whom you are associated, whereas you identify also with the nation in which you live and the planet upon which you move, it is ever so essential that you understand that you are an individual door to the very heart of God, and it is absolutely necessary that in the final analysis, you and you alone shall pass through that doorway, for no one can pass through that doorway of cosmic Christ purity for you. No one can attain to the manifestation of eternal victory and righteousness. Therefore, I urge upon you that while you are mindful of your brothers upon the pathway and seek to serve them according to the tenets of the brotherhood and the teachings of the lords of Samaria, of the holy order of the Husamarians, that you will also bear in mind the need to be aware individually of the great stream of purity that is your life and can never be requalified by another, in so much as you are solely responsible for that manifestation. I agree that projections may come against you, and the darts of the wicked ones may seem to penetrate your consciousness, causing you distress. But you must pay no attention to these arrows and slings of outrageous fortune, but understand that by opposing, you cannot always overcome them. But by accepting the mighty pressure of your own stream of cosmic purity from the heart of God, you are able to do that which you cannot do by the power of mortal resistance and by a feeling in your mind of, oh, I do not want that. Precious ones, to say, oh, I do not want that to an unwanted condition may be ever so true, but the opposition of that often seems to reverse itself and give you a charge of energy which will bring into your world the very things you do not want. And so many times we find individuals who yearn for purity are manifesting the very opposite quality of that, simply because they are so busy fighting against that which they do not want, that they further entrench and establish that activity within their world by the power of their resistance. I want you therefore to understand that while you ought to resist evil, you must understand the need to affirm the power of good and of God's purity far more than you shall engage in an activity of mere resistance. I do not say that there is never a time when you should completely forget about resistance, for the statement and admonishment of the Master, resist the devil and he shall flee from you, is most effective. It is simply that you must not spend all of your time fighting or beating the air and forget to establish the patterns of purity which are so essential for you to move forward in the scale of progress. You see, beloved ones, when you continue to fight a battle against some force, you may withstand that force and perhaps stop its inroads from coming into your world. But this does not mean, gracious ones, that you are able, by fighting this battle, to necessarily establish patterns of progress which are so essential for your future attainment of the power of purity, so that you can at one given moment invoke the power of purity by a simple word saying, I am purity in action here. I am God's purity established forever. And the stream of light from the very heart of God that embodies all of his purity is flowing through me and establishing round about me the power of invincible cosmic purity, which can never be requalified by the human. By understanding the need for positive reinforcement of the power of right attitude in your own mind, not only will you succeed in invoking purity, but also in invoking other qualities of God, so much so that you will find your world is changed just by the concept of purity. I want you to know that the pure colors which we have and emanate into space are a form of the pastel colors, which so many of you are in love with, and rightly so. For the pastel colors embrace a greater quantity of the purity ray than is focused in the more garish hues, which are often tinged by the auric colors manifesting in mankind's aura and containing the pattern of human anger, the vibratory action of human fear, of death, and of destructive activities. You would do well then to take either the pure electric blue or the pastel hue of the blue and wear it upon your person. Also to understand that the color of red is not to be worn upon your person or around about your homes, but rather the color of a very beautiful pink, which brings to you a manifestation of the love ray from the heart of God and establishes the aspect of pure love within the heart. Even the men, the gentlemen who are assembled here, will find that by choosing the proper color for their neckties and outer garments, they will be enhancing the qualities in their world of spirituality and purity's ray. These outer manifestations will not do this for you alone, precious ones. You will need to let them serve as reminders of the need to establish the mighty light rays of God as focuses within yourself. Therefore, I am sometimes depicted, precious ones, as standing in a great shell, colored somewhat in the manner of a delicate shell pink, with the colors of the rainbow barely peeping through here and there their soft pastel hue. This is but a symbol of the great stream of purity that God emanates out, which he would captivate man with, even as a band shell is intended to capture the vibratory action of the various instruments and pour it out into the audience. So this shell of purity, which men have depicted behind me in their various outpicturings of what they consider my form to be, is a manifestation of a cosmic amphitheater intended to radiate out a feeling of God purity to all life. And this is my will to do, to radiate such purity to mankind that is so charged and supercharged with cosmic love that those who stand within that ray will be filled through and through with the understanding of the love which Jesus and other of the ascended masters have always had for purity. I would like for a moment to digress and say to you that there are many individuals who have descended to great depths of impurity. And when those individuals have made their way back from those cesspools and sewers of human thought and feeling, back to the place where they are able to feel the most comfortable radiation of God's purity, the gratitude that floods their heart is almost simultaneously identified with the gratitude that men feel when they are in a state of consciousness which you call a nightmare, but which in reality is a manifestation of astral substance in their world, and then the individual escapes from that dream trance condition into the world of outer physical reality. How often, blessed ones, individuals have expressed gratitude to at last be awake and not trapped and snared in the vibratory action of those conditions of trance which resemble sleep, but which in reality are astral states of horror, which cause mankind to suffer greatly and be afflicted because of their experiences in the astral realms. Shun these conditions, blessed ones, and understand the need whenever you experience them, if you do, that you must make more decrees to God for purity before you pass into the realm of sleep and into the arms of Morpheus. For you must understand that sleep ought to be an occasion for recharging the vital pure energies of your being. It ought to be a time when the batteries of human life can be literally filled with the purity of the divine presence, and it is necessary before you fall asleep to establish some pattern of upward rising, elevation in consciousness that will lead you by the power of the sacred fire to find those pathways of cosmic penetrability where the spirit of purity can sweep through your finer bodies while you sleep and leave you the blessedness of the childlike ascended master consciousness. This consciousness is so sweet and simple and is indeed of the kingdom of heaven. It is so pure and godlike that it is almost a replica of the consciousness of God himself. This may come as a great surprise to you, but all of the intricate patterns of the universe, precious ones, are composed of the simple geometric expressions which God has actually manifested in triangle, circle, square, parallelogram, and other geometric forms. It is the combination of these forms which makes the complexity of life, and therefore mankind must understand that the Godhead is simple in manifestation, but complex in its diversification. You must understand then that purity and love, while they may seem to be only words and have often become very trite to mankind because they feel they know all of the mysteries of the word, are mighty tides of eternal and immortal life whose intricate inward patterns require aeons of time for angelic beings to decipher. Yet human beings, in the simplicity and ignorance of their own thought and feeling, often feel at a certain age that they know the meaning of love. I tell you, the qualities of God require aeons to decipher by cosmic beings, and therefore certainly it would pay you to learn and relearn again and again many of the teachings which have been handed down to you of Holy Writ. So many individuals will take up a pearl of wisdom, precious ones, or one of the lessons of the ascended masters, and feel that by reading it through once they have completed that assignment and will move on to something else. Many of you have found out that the intense radiation patterns in this released material enables you again and again to profit by the tremendous outpicturing of the ascended masters. In this connection this afternoon, I feel compelled to say that what you have received at this class is far beyond the understanding of mortal mind. Therefore, I trust that you will not attempt to gorge yourself all at once by every thought, but take those that prove most beneficial to you and will give you the greatest assistance at this given time, and then prepare yourselves to study these releases when they are in print, that thereby you may utilize them to the fullest in your leisure and perfection. Precious ones, God is not crowding you into a niche that he desires you to be in simply in order to satisfy himself. He often tempers the wind to the shorn lamb, and he is so anxious to give you the fullness of his great love that you will experience the release from all of the impurity of your being which the great law of perfection requires, and have the fullness of his love manifesting in your mind and heart. You have a saying here upon this planet that Rome was not built in a day, yet so many of you seem to feel when dealing with spiritual matters that if you do not overcome all of your afflictions and faults in one given moment, you are simply not living. Precious ones, let me give you the comfort of knowing that we ourselves who are in these higher octaves of light required a terrific amount of time in order to obtain our release from all of the pressures of life that surrounded us. And we are able to give you the fullness of our compassion, encompassing you round about with such love as ought to assist you to the very fullness of your ascension. Yet that which we have to give you is but a portion of the mighty release of your own God presence and the I Am presence within the heart of the great central sun. Do you see then that if we ourselves required such an amount of time in order to obtain our own freedom and purity, do you see then if we are able in our state of development, which is less than the fullness of the Godhead, to understand and look upon you with compassion, that the Godhead himself looks upon you with the compassion of an infinite Father, and but awaits the release in your being of the stream of purity's acceptance, that will not fear to accept purity for yourself, that will not fear to accept purity now, that will not fear to say, here I am, take me, O God of purity, assimilate me and use me in the matrices of release for the mankind of earth. Let me not only invoke purity for myself, but let me invoke purity for every part of life. Let me not only invoke purity for my family, but for all the family of God neath the canopy of heaven. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, if you only understood how that purity's door is opening wider and wider while I am giving you this release, you would understand that the great orifice of God, the mighty mouth of spiritual purity, is uttering the word, the ancient word for purity at inner levels, which will charge and charge and charge this place with the essence of divine purity that shall never be erased in 1,000 years if it were never fed again by any life stream upon earth. And yet I am certain that every life stream that hears these words and enters this room from this day henceforward will understand that I am, by the power of light itself, establishing here a great focus of purity, that all may bathe in that focus and understand the benefits of it as a stream of light, greater than the fountain at Lourdes, as a healing fountain is the spiritual ray of purity which I am affixing in here. Now I call for the child, the incoming child. Let that child be brought in, that I may anoint that child with purity's ray. O Mohandas, thou who wast martyred for the sake of thy great love for purity, I anoint thee by the power of my ray, and I say thou shalt be a pure fountain to the earth, to give the love of brotherhood to mankind, and to establish forever the flame of infinite love. I christen thee in the name of cosmic purity, Aaron Lynn Prophet. So do thou go forth and perform thy service to all mankind. Be thou a focus of purity's flame, and let the earth bow before the flame of purity within thee. I am the goddess of purity, and thou art surrounded by the cross of my white fire purity forever. Peace be unto thee. Won't you please be seated? Ladies and gentlemen, that which has transpired here is an activity of great light, and the light of purity which goeth forth through this class, the thread so bright woven into the tapestry of the substance of this class. As you go to your homes and as you mingle with one another, remember that the goddess of purity has spoken not only to the child, but to the child innocence within thee individually. None of thee, none of thee, none of thee have in the past not been a babe. None of thee, none of thee, none of thee have not been born in purity from the heart of God. None of thee, none of thee, none of thee can say, thou wast not bathed with God's stream of purity one day. Therefore all that has transpired between the innocence of thy beginning, the childlike substance of thyself upon thy mother's knee, and upon the knee of thy cosmic mother, can be forgotten by the soul that is within thee. Wherever thou goest, then remember that thy angel of purity is with thee, and therefore as thou goest to thy homes, to those of you who are here in physical embodiment, I give an angel of purity to go with thee throughout all eternity, and I convey this angel of purity to thee, commending to thee the memory of thy immortal soul in all of its eternal loveliness, the garment of light, the garment of God purity. Ladies and gentlemen, as the goddess of purity, May I wrap my arms around thee with the flame of my love for purity. May I wrap my arms around thee with my hopes that thou wilt understand God's purity. May I wrap my arms around thee forever with the foreverness of the Eternal One, and know that as a sun, purity is expanding tonight all over the world because of this activity of the opening wider and wider of the door of universal purity, the means, the shining pathway back to the heart of God. Ladies and gentlemen, I seal you then with the kiss of Christ's purity upon the substance of thy soul. I thank you.